now. And we should see that come through. We'll give it a couple seconds just so we can kind of get started. Okay, you ready? I think you're always ready, right? Cool. Okay, all right, here we go. Hi, Dela. Thank you so much for being here today.
Hey, Lauren, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yes.
I'm really looking forward to this.
So excited. So for any of you who don't know, Dela is the founder and CIO of Alchemy Works, a data-driven marketing agency whose mission is essentially just to help businesses send seriously good messages by supporting the email, the paid social, and the SMS needs of e-commerce and enterprise level customers. Dela is, in my opinion, the definition of an expert email marketer. He's got a strong background in digital media, publishing, advertising, and honestly, I think more than 20 years of experience in email marketing alone. So clearly just a great person to be talking to about this. I'm really excited for our chat today. Honestly, Dela, you're responsible for a few of kind of my major aha moments within the industry. I've been doing this for about 14 years and, I've always had access to some of the content that you've been writing and the concepts that you've just been kind of floating over to the industry and kind of just changing the way that I look at email. So I'm kind of expecting you to do that again today. So no pressure there. But anyway, the real reason that we're here today and that we've invited Dela to chat with us for the Only Influencers Metrics project is because of a concept that he supports and backs up with a lot of data, which is my favorite part, is to track emails like ads. So as we get started here, Dela, I guess, can you walk us through what tracking emails like ads means?
Sure. And by the way, the 20 years, I started when I was like 14 or something, just so you know. Tracking email like ads. I think it's something that we talked about when we were talking about how we would do this. I think the biggest problem with email metrics is that they are campaign-based, right? Yeah. And what that means is you send out an email campaign or an email message, right? And let's say whatever the number, 10%, 15%, 20% open rate, okay? So you have, I'm gonna pick 15%. So you have a 15% open rate, you send it to 100 people, 15 people opened it, 85 didn't. And you go, oh my God, I need to improve my open rate, okay? So the next day you send out an email and you get another open rate. This time it could be 18%, it could be 20% for the sake of argument. If it is 18%, or it could be 12%, right? If it is 18%, were the 15 who opened it the first time in that 18, or were they randomly completely different? Yeah. That's a big, big question, right? And so you could have a 20% open rate and immediately in your head you go, oh yeah, my whole database sees at least one email every 5 I send, right? Because that's how it is randomly distributed or equally distributed. But you'd feel very differently if only 20 people opened it over a 12-month period, right? 20%. It's the same 20% all the time, 80% didn't. So that's kind of the difference between a campaign-based metric and a subscriber-based metric, which is saying, I sent 20 emails out. Right. This person opened 5 of them, that person opened 1 of them. Now that has and this number of people opened 1, 10, 15, 20, whatever the number is. That's what a subscriber-based metric is. And it's the difference between, in my view, a photograph and a movie clip. That's what the difference is. Yeah. So if you use campaign-based metrics, in my view, that's like trying to optimize every frame of a movie or a movie clip, rather than saying, let me just watch this and understood what happened, right? Yeah. So you could optimize every single frame. That's how campaign-based KPIs feel to me. Yeah. I'm sitting down and I'm taking a photograph of the building and spending all day trying to work out what I understood from that photograph of the building. And if I'd watched the movie for another 5 seconds more, I'd have seen it being blown up. Right. Yeah. Okay. So stepping back, seeing the bigger picture. Absolutely. That's the difference. I guess, why do you think marketers are doing this wrong? Like why is it that we're so focused on the campaigns? And I guess, how should we be doing it differently? Actually, and by the way, I often do this. Let me finish off and I'll come back to why marketers are doing it. Yeah, sure. So basically, to extrapolate, as in, where does the media thing come in? Where does advertising come in? No advertiser, no TV station, no newspaper or magazine goes to an advertiser and says, you only need one ad.
Right.
Never. I mean,
No.
that would be stupid, right? So they go, oh no, you've got to book a campaign, right? Reach and frequency. So when you're buying ads, the reason people want to be on Super Bowl is that more people watch Super Bowl than any other TV show. That's reach, right?
Yeah.
Frequency is like Geico. How do I know 15% in 15 minutes? How do I know that? It's because they said it again and again and again and again. Now, you could go, well, that's really boring. Well, actually, no, because Geico have been really smart to evolve the story, right? It's not the same story as it was 10 years ago, but they've changed themselves from being one of the smaller insurance companies in the US to being one of the biggest, simply by saying the same thing over and over and over again, right? Everybody gets it. They use the lizard or gecko or whatever he is, and then they move to something else, and they have all kinds of different stuff going on. That's reach and frequency. And reach and frequency has to be connected by saying how many times an individual group of, so first of all, how big was the cohort?
Yeah.
So a show that's seen by 1 million people is more expensive to advertise in than a show that's seen by 50,000 people, right? And if your commercial, if you can afford to have your commercial on every slot, you will make more money and have more brand recognition than if you only ad once a day, right? And again, even that, a commercial once a day is kind of dumb. You wouldn't want to do that. No. And that's really how I've put it together. So I view every email that you send as being a key part of the story. And we love talking about stories, but then we don't actually develop a conversation. The conversation means telling a narrative, telling a story, right? And keeping on and building on the story and adding to the story. But we tend to move away from that and actually say, no, I'm going to tell you this super, super fact, and you have to be interested today. And then tomorrow I'm going to tell you another super, super interesting thing. And the final piece about publishing that's kind of interesting is that only send something, you know, this idea that you only send something when you've got something really important to say, otherwise I won't bother my consumers.
Yeah.
Can you imagine the Washington Post or the New York Times or any newspaper turning around and saying, you know what, it's August, there's nothing to say, so we won't come out for 3 weeks, right? We just don't want to annoy people.
Yeah, no.
Their job is to find something interesting to say. And our job as marketers is to find something interesting to say. Find a way of making what we do, which is inherently dull, interesting. That's our job.
Yeah, so the storytelling, obviously, is really powerful there.
Yeah, so going back to why do we do that? It's a very, very complex story. So you've got to go back to the beginning. Most people in email marketing started from direct marketing, right?
Yeah.
And that's how the industry started, typically. Right. The other thing is that, and that means that they think in the way of direct marketers, and all the technology and everything is about delivering direct marketing goals. Segmentation is super, super important to direct marketers. Super important. Not reach and frequency. Do you know why?
Because it's
one word: cost.
Cost, yes, right. Yeah.
So when you're sending something out that costs cents, if not dollars or tens of dollars a unit to deliver to the individual, you're very careful who gets it, right? Now, if I made that free, so if I said to you, don't worry, I'll do all your direct marketing for free, or I'll do all your commercials on TV for free, how many people would immediately go, nah, I don't want to bother people?
Yeah.
You would just send as much as possible.
Right.
Now, so those two things are what shape thinking in email. And then finally, the other piece about email is, you know, we've talked about this quite a lot, is deliverability, right?
Yeah.
So it is possible, and I'll come back to that, to do stupid stuff that impact deliverability, right? For yourself and other people around you, for the sake of argument. It is possible to do that. And that word deliverability and that word unengaged, that word spam, so scares people that they conflated the two things together. And the campaign-based metrics means that very few people actually have an understanding of what happens if you send someone 5 emails a day for a year.
Yeah.
No one tests that. They'll test not mailing them for a year, but they won't test sending them 5 emails a day for a year because, no, we couldn't do that. So the point is very few people have enough understanding of what's happened over years to have any sense of truth or true understanding of what people actually want or don't want from an email.
Right.
And going back to publishing and advertising again, you'll never see anyone who says they want more commercials on TV. Nobody.
True.
You
Yeah.
never see anyone who says they want more billboards on the highway. You'll never see anyone who says, yeah, you know what, I'd rather 1 minute of music and 59 minutes of commercials. No one says that. So we should, and that's why no one in advertising asks customers, how much do you want, right?
Right.
So we do that. Everyone hates advertising. Everyone complains about it if you ask them the question. So don't ask them the question and they suck it up, because that's what we all do. And that's why I know names of products that I will never need or use.
Oh, yeah.
Feminine hygiene products. I can name about 5 brands. How relevant is that? But however, I do have a wife and 3 daughters. And if one day, as they do, because I'm the idiot in the house who gets to do all the chores, or I'm out, they'll say, hey, could you get me some sanitary products? And I'll go there and I'll go, oh, what brand should it be? You think I'm going to buy a brand I've never heard of? No. I'm going to buy the one that is on TV all the time that I understand and everybody knows. So that's why it's relevant, right? And that has happened.
Yeah.
And no feminine hygiene product brand could have predicted exactly when that was going to happen to me.
Yeah, totally. They just have to wait and hope that their product is kind of in top of mind whenever you need it, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Hence commercials, right? And that's where email is so brilliant, right?
Yeah.
Email is top of mind because it's the one thing, it's the only universal application online. It's the only, maybe search, but even search. I know, folks, my mom never searches for stuff, right? It never occurs to her, go Google something, right? She's in her 80s. It never occurs to her, oh, I could find that out. Whenever I say, oh, did you think of Googling it? She goes, oh, I always forget that, right? So, you know, search isn't, but email, 100%. She gets every email that she's ever sent, especially from us, but even brands. And she doesn't sign up to any brands and she doesn't get any spam. So the brands she gets are ones she wants to receive or she's actually purchased from. Right?
Yeah,
Again,
yeah.
a very rare occurrence for my mom. But if she buys something online, she will get the email from Amazon or whatever it is, and she's cool with it.
Okay. So I guess how do we put, okay, so I mean, there's the challenge, like, I guess, do you think this is a mindset issue for marketers, why they're kind of not thinking about this kind of greater thing? I mean, obviously that we're talking about the fact that they've come from a certain type of thinking, and so it's a little bit hard to kind of shift that. But I mean, do you think it's a challenge of just not thinking this way? Or do you think it's more of like a technical challenge where it's just really hard to kind of get to that subscriber level and really look at them over the course of a year? Like what do you think is the reason why people aren't doing it?
Is it hard? I would say the reason people aren't doing it is because they're looking at the wrong KPIs and they're chasing the wrong KPIs, right? And they're being asked and tasked with reporting against certain KPIs. So if you take open rates to be engagement, and you are tasked with maximizing open rate, and by the way, open rate is not engagement. I can show you an email that didn't get opened that engaged somebody. It's quite easy to do, right? Simple numbers. So we work with clients all the time. And when we first start working with them, we show them the numbers and then show how we can optimize them. How do we do that? We go back and look at all the data. And it's both easy and difficult. So think about it. On your list, you have X number of people, 100 people for the sake of argument. And every time you send an email, one of the following things could happen, right? You could be in the segment or not, right? Meaning you got the email or not, okay? You could even add deliverability and say it got to your inbox or not. And if it got into the inbox, it will be opened or not. And if it gets opened, it will be clicked or not. And if you get clicked, you could purchase or download or whatever the conversion action is, the call to action is. You can do all of those. So what you have to do is really simple. For everyone on the list, you have to work out what everyone on the list did with every email that you sent. That's where you start. And that's where I started 10 years ago, right? Today, you then start laying other things and asking yourself a question. Hang on a minute. I sent an email that said great deals in store this afternoon only.
Okay.
And 2 hours after I sent the email, you showed up in my store and bought the very thing that was in the subject line, and you didn't open the email. What am I supposed to conclude from that?
Yeah. Yeah.
And in fact, I've actually seen it happen. I was in Gap, and I see this is typical scene: baby in a buggy, mom, grandmom, right? And they're walking in. Mom drives buggy into Gap and goes, "Oh, I think they've got a sale. I saw it in my email today." Right? That's just in a mall. That happens all the time. So, and by the way, it works everywhere. So I'll give you another example. Every time you send an email to your entire list, which means it's got big reach, your paid search budget goes up. Your numbers go up. You're paying a ton more. So what you're doing is you're driving people to type into Google, and then the idiot goes and clicks on the paid link, and you're paying for someone that you drove to Google in the first place.
Right.
So an example of understanding how this all works over time, I often recommend to people is that, like, dial down your paid search when you send out your email to your whole list.
Yeah.
Right? Dial it down. Why pay top dollar for someone that you sent there? They were looking for you.
Yeah. Wow.
And so that's kind of so it's about the numbers and putting them together. And why do people not do that? They just don't think to do it, right? That's number one. And number two, I had my own agency, and I was interested, and I just hired data folks to give me the answer to those questions. And I also had good relationships with clients, and I was also able to get clients to buy into different KPIs from open rates and click rates. But most importantly, clients taught me, because I actually got into this whole thing, which we will get into eventually, which is about mailing your inactive list, right? Because back in the day, I was like everyone else. I was like, oh, why are you sending this? So for a start, your open rate goes up. So if you take half the people off your list who are not opening, your open rate will double, right? Whoopee.
Yeah.
I know, that's great.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing. The second thing, it was like, and I was one of my first conferences in the States, EIS conferences, the first one I ever did. I actually played the Monty Python parrot sketch where I said, this parrot is dead, right? I was going, these subscribers are dead, right? And I paraphrased the parrot Python. So I was actually in that place. And so to prove the client wrong, I decided to separate their active list from their inactive list and watch what happened, because they wouldn't stop mailing them. And I wanted to prove to them. We mailed that inactive list for 4 years, right? And do you know something interesting? The open rate for the inactive list that we never topped up with anyone new stayed at between 1.5% and 2% for best part of 4 years.
Okay. Huh.
Now, you have a list of inactives, and I know many people that is in the tens of millions, 2 to 4%, or even 1.5% of 10 million every month is probably more customers than they acquire through search.
Right.
Paid or otherwise.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like peanuts, 1 to 2%, but yeah, to your point, if it's a big list, that is a lot of people that are.
And which is the biggest segment everybody always has.
Yeah. Right. It's always the unengaged. Yeah.
I don't even call them unengaged, and that's something else. I call them, people call them emotionally unsubscribed. That's what people like to say. Oh, they're emotionally unsubscribed from you. So they never want to see any email, but they couldn't be bothered to click unsubscribe, right? I call them unemotionally subscribed. You're just a brand, and they have a life. They're happy to get your email, but they don't have to open every one. But they do know that once a year they buy insurance or jeans or clothing or swimwear or take a service or buy a laptop. And when that happens, they're going to be engaged for a few weeks before and a few weeks afterwards, and then they're going to go back. Now, the interesting thing is every time you win them back out of the inactive, everyone will go inactive. Only an idiot opens every email that you ever send them. Or your mom, right? No one.
Fair enough.
No one does that. Or your competitor, right? So whenever, or a weird person, right? And that's what I mean is we had a client and I showed them, look, this guy opens every email. They said, yeah, we know them. They're a collector. They buy every new product that we bring out because they collect them.
Oh, okay.
Now, do you create a marketing program around somebody like that?
No. Yeah. No. Yeah.
You create a marketing program about someone who dips in and out. However, every time you pull them out of inactive, back into active, they make a transaction, go back inactive and come back again, you're building loyalty.
Yeah.
And it's much more than letting them go out and buying them back through Facebook or Google. Now, that doesn't say that doesn't work or you shouldn't do that. But what it does say is that I would start with email first and then go to paid placements afterwards.
Okay. So, okay, I want to talk about deliverability, but first I'd like to kind of think about this because, you know, we were talking about an example of, let's say, like 100 recipients, right? So in that case, of course, it's really easy to look at this. But when you're looking at tens of 100, you know, thousands or millions of recipients, like how do you scale that? How do you track all of them individually? Like, do you need to hire somebody? Like, how would a marketer who's like, this is just my job, I'm just interested, I want to take a shot at this, how would they even start to look at that?
Okay, so first of all, I would recommend, by the way, and again, it depends. If you're a marketer working for a small brand where you're pretty much everything, that's a different thing from if you work for a large brand that almost certainly has an enterprise brand that almost certainly has a huge analytics department and everything else, and everything that helps them go there. However, having an analytics department is not the same thing as getting the data that you need in the way that you want as a marketer. So even clients that have big analytics departments oftentimes will go to an agency. So I would say find an agency that actually can help you do that.
Right.
Okay. But as I say, it's not hard. That's not a complicated equation. But as the numbers get bigger and bigger and bigger, as soon as you're doing that with 1 million people and 20 emails a month, then it's a big number. The computation is still simple, but the physical computational power that it takes to crunch the number and give you the answer, and it probably would be too big for Excel. So you start having to go into more complicated programs and blah, 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 and all of that sort of stuff. So that's where it becomes difficult. And the second thing, the other challenge that marketers will have is that to do it properly, you actually have to look at the impact of an email that doesn't get opened. So you have to look at people who never open email but got them and count how many they got. So funnily enough, someone who got 5 emails and didn't open a single one spends less than someone who got 20 emails and didn't open a single one. Go figure. That's like saying someone saw your commercial 5 times versus someone who saw your commercial 20 times. What do you think is going to happen? Ditto, if you're trying to, even if you're content marketing and you're not trying to sell, if you send one newsletter with 5 articles once a month, you'll get far fewer people read any article than if you broke it into 5 pieces and sent one a week. Right? And better than that, some people read 2 or 3 of them, and some of them might even read 4 or 5 of them. But the bottom line is more people will read at least once than don't. And that's kind of the principle. And so you need to start also doing attribution. And I would say probably the biggest challenge is actually the attribution piece.
Okay.
I'd also say not all ESPs make it easy to pull lists.
Agreed. Yes.
And not all ESPs APIs are up to the task. They're there because they need to have one. They're not there because they're there to make your life easier. So when your ESP doesn't make it easy, you actually have to physically download and export every mailing that you did and put them into an Excel spreadsheet and then start doing the crunching from there. So it's onerous rather than difficult.
Okay. Yeah. So it's really just gear up, drink some Red Bulls, maybe. I don't know. get ready to get dirty.
Yeah. But just actually want to do it. The thing about it is you're asking yourself questions like, when did this person last open? No, actually, the best question to ask is, on average, how many times a year does someone open a single email?
Okay.
That's a good start.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
And then the other one, in fact, the 2 numbers are reach and frequency. So how many people opened at least one? That's reach.
Okay. Yep.
And frequency of those, how many opened 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and look at which of those numbers has the biggest impact on revenue.
Right.
And believe it or not, the biggest impact on revenue is the number of people who open 1.
Really?
Which is reach. It's the second biggest number. The biggest number is people who opened none, and the second biggest number is people who only opened 1. And then it goes smaller and smaller and smaller, and then you get the idiot who opened every one you sent.
Yeah, right. We like him though. He makes us feel good.
Yeah, it's your mom. It's your mom. Or your boss. Worse than that, it could be your CMO or your CEO, and that's trouble.
That's stressful. Yeah, we don't want that. Nice. Okay. So I want to get into the deliverability piece because, obviously I'm a deliverability person. I know you have a lot of background in this as well. The common recommendation that we give whenever there is a deliverability issue that we're facing is really to target the actives more, to suppress the inactives and send to the inactives. I'm calling them inactives, which is, people who have not opened or clicked or registered some sort of, engagement with your email. So, you're definitely one of the few people in our space, I think, who's kind of saying to, send emails more, right? Send more emails. So I guess what would you say to cautious deliverability folks who are kind of saying like, but this could negatively impact my sender reputation, right? Like how do you kind of strike that balance between quality and quantity to get those optimal results without impacting your ability to hit the inbox in the first place, right?
Cool. I'm going to invoke my hashtag DBS, right? Okay. I've learned, I'm going to do both because I can't resist it. Mm-hmm. I've learned to say hashtag DBS means do be smart, right?
Right.
I used to call it hashtag don't be stupid.
Okay, works both ways.
Right? So, and my classic example of hashtag DBS is if I say it's safe to leave the building, don't say not if you jump from the 10th floor. That's just stupid, or that's not smart, right? Mm-hmm. If I say it's safe to leave the building, I'm assuming that you're going to take the elevator, walk to the ground floor, check the road before you cross it, and hashtag DBS. That's the way I would look at it.
Yeah.
You can understand why I'm very annoying, but anyway, I find it very amusing. So, what do you tell a deliverability person? So there's two things. It seems to me that deliverability folks have been using both as a carrot and a stick, right? The fact that the inbox providers now measure deliverability on the subscriber level. Mm-hmm. Now that's really important. Mm-hmm. So that means they know on a subscriber level what your behavior is. Mm-hmm. And in fact, the whole big debate that came about was when we had a couple of deliverability folks from the big inbox providers at that conference. It was EEC, I think it was.
Yes. Oh, yes.
And I turned around and I asked him a couple of questions, and actually he said flat out, don't kill people, don't stop after 12 months, even 12 months, because you're leaving money on the table. Huh. And no one in the deliverability community particularly wanted to hear that message, right? But so if they're doing, and he actually said, you know what, we even know the folks who hit the spam button for unsubscribe.
Aha, okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Well,
right.
That's what individual subscriber level understanding is all about, right? Yeah, right? I know that this person never hits unsubscribe, but whenever they don't want to get an email, they hit the spam button. Am I going to treat that spam complaint the same as someone who always hits the unsubscribe button and then once hits the spam button? That's what subscriber behavior is all about. And in fact, it goes back to exactly the point I'm making about moving away from open rates and click rates to subscriber reach and frequency, is because that's exactly what we're talking about. If I do an email subject line test and it goes out and I get a lift of 10%, who were those 10%? Yeah. Right? Was it people who haven't opened anything for a year? Or is it people who regularly open and suddenly open? What was the conversion rate for that? Are there subject lines that make long-term inactives open? And are there subject lines that make someone who's been engaged for a while and about to drop off, stop dropping off, and everything in between? That's what subscriber level thinking does. We call it audience management at Alchemy Works. Audience management is about knowing that. Audience management is saying everyone moves in and out of the pots, right? Nothing is permanent. And I'll come back to the deliverability thing at the moment. Yeah. So the key is to manage how they move in and out of the pots. And so, for example, for one of our clients, we calculated for every week longer we kept a subscriber in the engaged pot. Now, typically they spent about 3 weeks there. Okay. Yeah. Before they started dropping out, and then they would be moved into the inactive file and But every week we kept them on was worth $7 per subscriber to the client. Huh. Okay. And every week, and they spent about 3 to 6 months in the unengaged file. Every week we shortened that was worth $7 to $12. So there's plenty of money involved in understanding how people move in and out. So my biggest problem with deliverability, people, and the fear is that they're thinking of it as a campaign rather than individuals, and thinking about it and saying, actually, if I fallow these guys and never ever mail them again, their value drops from a non-opener being $300 a year,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
To not being emailed. They still shop with you, but they only spend $100 a year.
Yeah.
And if you can get them to open, they spend $700 a year. That's what we're dealing with.
Ugh.
So yes, not mailing them works, right? They don't evaporate. They don't ever stop buying a brand, but the dollar value is cut by a third, even if they didn't open a single email that you sent, and by up to 7 times if they opened or clicked on at least one email.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where it is. So back to deliverability. I think that it's simple. Deliverability begins and ends with bad data. Simple. If you start with a perfectly clean list and you never do anything stupid like buy a list or suddenly find a file of people that you hadn't mailed for 7 years and suddenly start mailing all of them at once, which I don't call very smart, right? If you don't do that kind of stuff and you practice deliverability best practice and everything else, I think there's almost no limits to the number of emails that you can send somebody without deliverability problems.
Yeah. Okay.
Remember, you start with a clean list, your best practice all the way through. Does that make sense?
Yes.
How on earth could, and email addresses tend not to go bad as much as everyone likes to think they do, right? They do in B2B, but less in B2C. How often do you change your email address for the thing that your credit card is associated with?
Not very often. Yeah, totally.
If ever.
Yeah, right.
If ever. You may have 2, one for business, one for home, or one for family and partner, and one for me personal stuff. But the bottom line is you don't mess with that. You stick with that all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so the decay argument doesn't work for me. I don't care how many email addresses someone has, just make sure I have the one with their CC card, right? Their credit card. If I have that one, I'm good.
Yeah.
So if I have the credit card, and by the way, if someone wants to sign up to my email list with their, I don't know, junk mail email address, it's still better than nothing, right? Because they will probably go in there every once in a while to have a look. And by the way, people who do that kind of stuff are not normal people. They tend to be people who are very digital savvy, have a lot of email. They look a lot like us folk, and they don't look like construction workers, nurses, cops. They don't look like regular people, right? They look like white collar, educated digital people who sit in front of a computer all day and go, oh my God, it's so much better than email because it's not intrusive. Yeah. Forget it. So that's the whole thing, is that our experiences tend to blind us to what the reality is. So back to sending an email. Do be smart. Don't just take an unengaged list and mail everyone on one day and not mail anyone else. Take it, break it into 1 part, 5 parts, 10 parts, 20 parts. Filter them through. I know it's got a bad name, snowshoeing. It's called common sense, right? At the end of the day, that's what ESPs do. ESPs actually manage their deliverability in that way. They know the lists that are cleaner. They know the lists that are less clean. They know the times of day. They know the ESPs, and they just manage it. They know that this inbox provider hates being suddenly hit with 1 million emails in one go. And so they rein it back. They've got algorithms that spot when that's happening. So it's just called common sense, right? Yeah. So that's what you should do with deliverability. And any good deliverability person would find that relatively easy to do. So you use your common sense. You don't mail them all at once. And going back to the frequency, all I ever said is find a reason to send 1 more email, right? Now, if your inactive file gets 1 a month, make it 2. Who's going to die? That's nobody. Yeah, right? I didn't say move from 1 to 50, right? And the same thing is, if your engaged file is now getting an email every day, find a really good reason to send 2 emails in one day. Don't just do something random and crap. Think really hard and say, how do I make someone have 2 emails in one day? Right?
Yeah.
And that could be just a resend with a different subject line. It could be a resend with the same subject line. They're surprisingly effective, and you need to dip in and out and test and learn from all of these things and find out what works for you. But ultimately, if we're looking at deliverability, I'm going to ask you this question. I know we haven't rehearsed this, so I'm sorry, I'm going to put you on the spot. Here's the question.
Yeah.
If I have a list where 80% have opened one message,
right?
In a quarter, is that list more or less engaged than a list where that's a fifth of the size, right? Where half of them open every email or get every email and half get nothing? I would say 80% is the bigger number than 50 in terms of engagement.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And that's, I mean, I think speaking to what you were talking about with reach, right? Like if you're reaching a whole bunch of different people and even if they're opening just once, that's better than having a really small segment that's very loyal and opening every single day, right?
Well, from a financial perspective, absolutely. And by the way, they're where your next loyal customers are going to come from, right? That's how you're going to replace the loyal, because loyalty doesn't last forever. I know we like to think we can keep people loyal from age 5 to age 95, but the reality is we dip in and out, things go out of fashion, blah, 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 blah. And ultimately, I sell insurance. You don't even want me. Right? You don't even want me. You have to have me. And I'm going to try and pretend to myself that I can be your best friend. No.
You just need to
You're just my insurance provider. You send me more emails than your competitor, I'll probably buy off you. Perhaps, if you ask me, did you know provider A sends you 3 a week and provider B sends you 1 a week, which do you prefer? I'll go, oh, I prefer B because it's 1 a week. But when I go and buy, I'll buy from A.
Yeah, right. Because they're the ones that are top of mind. Totally. Yeah.
Yes.
Makes a lot of sense.
So the deliverability thing is, do be smart.
Yes.
Speak to somebody. Don't just crazy go out and start mailing everybody that you haven't mailed for a long time. Yeah. But more importantly, never get to a place where a big chunk of your list hasn't been mailed for a year. Never go to that place.
Yeah, right. Totally agree. Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I think what the biggest takeaway is literally like start with good data quality. Like you said, I mean, I think I tend to see that the biggest drivers for deliverability issues are a problem with data in some way, shape, or form. Right. So, so that makes sense when you're saying you can send as much email as you want, but there has to be a solid foundation there. You can't just kind of pull that list out of nowhere and then just expect it to perform the same way. Right?
No, that's right. Absolutely. And that includes bringing stuff in. And that's also true of acquisition, right?
Yeah.
However good your acquisition is, if you just dump them into your program without some sort of thought or what you want to do with them, it's going to be less effective, right? Than if you think through what that is. So it's the same thing. Someone has been in my file, I've been only mailing them once or whatever it is, I now want to make that twice. What do I do?
Yeah.
And then the other thing is, every time you do those mailings, make sure, my view, every time you mail your inactive file, split the openers into since they last opened.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So just take all the openers and look at the date. And again, some ESPs make it really easy to pull a list or pull last open date, right? Pull that and then ask yourself and start working out which subject lines impact which cohort the most.
Okay, right.
So now you're getting smarter, #DBS. So what you're doing is saying, I have noticed that this subject line works really well on people who haven't engaged with me for 3 years. I mean, it's nuts. I don't know why that suddenly made them all open my email, right? So now when you start mailing older people in your inactive, or someone now has got to 2 years and nothing you did could make them open, go back and look at the subject lines that made a whole bunch of people that look like that person open.
Okay.
And so if you want to try and keep someone engaged for an extra week, right? We know about when someone's going to tip off. It's surprisingly quick, and engagement, when they drop off, literally in the space of a week, the average open rate for an engaged person who's opened within, say, 21 days and an engaged person who hasn't opened for 22 days, it drops from like 20% to 2%.
Ooh, wow.
The engaged fall off is actually the open rate for lapsed engagers is lower than the open rate for your unengaged file. They've just bought. You've hammered them, right? And I don't mean that they've just bought from you. You've given them, people who bought this, bought that. You've done this and say, you looked at blue, do you want purple? You've done all of that stuff. They spent all the money that they're going to spend on jeans or insurance or bread or whatever it is you sell, right? Nothing will make them buy more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And they are just not interested in your email. And so they just go off the cliff.
Mm-hmm.
So you know that, you let it happen, you put them in, you follow them a bit, you reduce the frequency. Does that make sense? And then you start looking at, they've been fallow for 4 weeks now. Our average is this. Let's start doing something. And then start getting worried after 6 weeks or 8 weeks or 12 weeks or whatever the numbers are for your brand.
Mm-hmm.
That's what you need to do.
I love it. Yeah. Yeah. It's so cool. And it's so nice to hear someone saying like, look at the data, use your data, use your data. Like that is just the best way to really understand your audience.
It's all there. And by the way, I can't remember ever taking on a new client and going, you've been over mailing.
Okay. Yeah.
Seriously. And the reason is people don't have a sense of reach and frequency. They just look how many emails go out the door.
Right.
So they go, oh, we're sending 30 emails a month. That means we're over mailing. Oh my God. But when you look at it, what they're actually doing is sending almost no emails to most people and every email to the engaged. Now, the paradox to me is if people hate email and sending an email is a kind of punishment that we do to torture consumers, why are we sending our favorite customers more torture?
That's a good question. Yeah, right.
I've never understood that paradox. It's like, well, hang on a minute. Email is such a bad thing, but when you're a good customer, I'm going to mail you to death. And when you're a bad customer, who I hate anyway, I don't do anything to try and make you unsubscribe.
Oh, man. Yeah.
I just don't mail you.
Yeah, right.
And my competitor who continued mailing me will re-engage me and you won't. That's why the dollar value of a customer who isn't emailed is only $100. A customer who is emailed is $300.
Right.
That's why. It's because of that brand touch that when you made that decision, I was front of mind. That's what makes the difference.
I love it. Yeah, that makes so much sense. Cool. Okay. Well, I think we need to wrap up. We've had a great conversation, but I'd like to kind of just kind of touch on one last question. Obviously, this is, for the Only Influencers Metrics project. We're really trying to kind of just help younger, people in our industry really understand how to use metrics, how to get awesome stuff out of it. So I guess what would be your advice for helping them successfully leverage metrics and improve their performance over time? I know it's hard. You have to, boil it down.
I know. I have my humorous answer and I've got my serious answer, right?
Okay.
So I'm going to start with the serious answer. Learn to count. The funny answer. Learn to count. That's learn to count.
Okay.
What does that mean? It's kind of understanding numbers, and I'm blessed with the fact that my numbers. I understand that a very small percentage of a very big number is a very good thing, and a very large percentage makes me immediately suspicious. Anyone who uses a rate is hiding something. Okay. We made $5 million more this month. Fine, that's a number. Our conversion rate went up 20% last month, but our sales went down by $1 million, right?
Yes.
So that's what I mean. So again, to paraphrase a golfing expression where they say driving's for the show, putting's for the dough, right? Okay. I say this in email, right? Rates are for the show, numbers are for the dough. And it's basically that. So the simple answer is, be very, very wary of rates as a means of driving business. Use numbers to look under the cover, look under the hood, and say, actually, you know something? In fact, I know. As soon as someone gives me a big number for an improvement in ROI or whatever it is, I know they started with 3.
I was going to say, right. Yeah.
Right.
That's just growth on 3 sales.
You'll never see Walmart announcing that their revenues are up 90%. That's never going to happen. Walmart are happy when their revenues are up 3%. Okay. They're very happy when their revenues are up 3% because that's like hundreds of millions of dollars.
Right.
And that's the difference. So whenever you see rates, peel that back, especially when it comes out. Now, feel free to use them to impress your superiors. Feel free. But don't use them to fool yourself. Okay. That's the point.
Yeah.
You've got to really, really understand what's going on. And it is quite easy, and we know this, to improve open rates and reduce everything.
Oh, yes.
Total opens are lower, total clicks are lower, total revenue's lower, but hey, look, my open rate's higher. Why? Because I didn't mail anybody who I thought wouldn't open it.
Right.
That's one way.
Yeah.
So, or send out, you know, an oops email or something. There's lots of ways that you can fake it and come up with a number, but the bottom line is that rates and revenue are not the same thing. Even conversion rates. And there's a lot of people who love conversion rates and stuff like that. So I tend to focus on totals.
Yeah.
Total opens, total clicks, total revenue, and most importantly, how many people are in each cohort. So if your engaged file is roughly the same size every month,
right,
and your acquisition rate is 2 or 3%, that tells me right away that you are losing as many people as you acquire every month, right away, because otherwise your list would be growing, right?
True.
And if your inactive file is growing, that's a terrible thing. It just means that you're doing nothing to reverse the process, right? You're just going, that's it, dead, never speaking to them again, unless I pay Google or Facebook for them. Then I'll have them back because they hate email, but God, they love social media.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
You know, and I mean, the cheapest thing, you know, the cheapest way of communicating with human beings that has ever existed is email.
Yeah.
Nothing will ever beat email in terms of cost of delivery of a message. I can't imagine how that's possible.
Yeah, I was going to say never feels like a really bold statement, but you might be right. I can't imagine what it would be that would be more cost effective, right?
No, I mean, the only thing would be mind thought, but anyway, think about that. How many people would be able to sort of mind meld with 1 million people, right? That's actually really hard. You can mind meld with one person or 2 or 5. Right. And I suspect the mind melder with 1 million, you pay that person, I hope it's me, millions of dollars to mind meld with the whole world. But the bottom line is nothing is cheaper.
Yeah.
Nothing's cheaper than email. And that's one of the reasons why spending a lot of time and effort on segmentation and targeting in the way direct marketing doesn't make sense. Whereas audience management, which is much more a sort of reach and frequency and cost per thousand thing, that makes more sense. And that's another reason why I think the two things work together. Awesome. And I talk too much.
Well, no, we all do. I think this is a thing in email marketing. We love to talk as much as we love to send emails. So it happens. But yeah, honestly, this has been so helpful. Honestly, you did it. You really helped me change my mind a little bit here today. So I really appreciate the time. This is going to be awesome. You know, this for all of our viewers, this video is part of the Only Influencers Metrics project, where we've online resources. It's free to everybody, so go check it out. It talks about the email marketing metrics, how to use them, how to interpret them. You know, honestly, our goal with this project is basically just to help people in the industry use email metrics better and be better at email marketing in general. So thanks, Dela, for helping us do that. And it's really been a pleasure.
Thank you. And I'd encourage everyone to go and look at the metrics project and all that, and the output from it is really good. Thank you.
All right. Thanks so much, Dela.